Okay, folks, she's a little shy, so give her a hand when she comes out.
Eyes on me. Good.
We have a new attraction. Think it'll scare the kids?
Welcome to Editors on Editing. I'm Glenn Garland. Kevin Stitt has edited such terrific films as 42, Jack Reacher, Cloverfield, The Kingdom, A Knight's Tale, and X-Men, as well as many others. Now he has brought his editing skills to the sensational blockbuster Jurassic World. Well, Kevin, it's a real pleasure to have you here today. I loved the movie. It was fantastic.
Well, that's good to hear. I'm glad to be here.
So how did you get into editing?
You know, like so many people wanted to get into the movie business probably when I was like 10 years old. Played around with movies, Super 8 and all that. I actually kind of thought I wanted to get into camera, to be on the set.
Mm-hmm.
When I got out of college, I worked on a couple sort of independent films. My experience on the set was that it's so much to do with logistics and sort of getting the trucks moved around that there were only really a handful of people that were really involved in the creative process of making the movie. Somehow I was exposed to the editing process after working on the set.
Mm-hmm.
I just sort of it hit me, it struck me. It's where movies, they can be made or broken there.
And as far as Colin Trevorrow, how was that working relationship? Because this was such a huge leap for him. He did a fantastic job, but going from such a small, wonderful film in Safety Not Guaranteed to this.
In the interview, he just sort of projected himself as, I'm not worried about the dinosaurs. That's not why they've hired me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm here to bring the story and the characters to this process,
Mm-hmm.
which is what I always look for no matter what the film is. You have to have characters that you want to go on this journey with. As soon as he started talking like that, I just knew, I said, this is going to be great. What I'm kind of the most proud about the film is that the first 30 minutes of it is really kind of leisurely.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where we're taking the time to sort of get to know these people as much as we can.
Mm-hmm.
And then by the time you get to about the end of the second act, you're pretty much at full throttle.
Sure.
All the way to the end.
Well, it's really effective how quickly you get to know all these characters.
Mm-hmm.
You see the family dynamic, you get the sense of who Claire is, you get the sense of who Owen is,
Right.
Very quickly. How long was that whole section that you said was a half an hour originally? Did it get pared down a lot, or was it always?
No, not really. I think my first cut was probably around 2 hours and 15 minutes or so. And then when we were finished, it was under 2 hours.
Wow. One thing that made this such a great ride is that you had so many ebbs and flows and valleys.
The problem with a lot of big tentpole effects-driven movies like this is that the set pieces and sequences can't be of all the same intensity. It's like once it plateaus, it can't just maintain that plateau to the end because it wears you out once. And by having the ebbs and flows, it lets the audience have a release. And the other thing that I really appreciate in this movie is that the audience is in for the ride with these characters.
Mm-hmm.
And the characters are injected into these sequences. And I think that's the biggest achievement.
We're gonna have to jump. I can. Are you ready? 1, 2, come on.
And then as far as making sure that we're caring about our leads, but also keeping
The chaos
the
going.
chaos.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about it.
Well, in all the sequences, and especially the third act, it was Colin's goal to keep the characters in the midst of it. I think by keeping the characters involved, you're keeping them in jeopardy and you're keeping the audience more interested.
When you started the movie, did you watch Jurassic Park again?
I did.
You did?
Yeah. And I was surprised. It'd been many years since I'd seen it. And so many movies like that had an effect on you at a certain age, years and years later, you go back to revisit them and you're kind of disappointed in them. But Jurassic Park didn't. I mean, it's as if it was made yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. One of my favorite scenes was when they actually go into the old Jurassic Park.
Yeah.
and you see the banner that's down because that was such a classic shot.
Yeah.
And you start bringing in the theme. It just brought back such great nostalgia.
Yeah, it's a real tip of the hat to the original, but without sort of overstating it. You know? I think the real fans kind of appreciate that.
Sure.
Yeah. When Chris and Bryce are in the old visitor center and the IREX attacks, Colin and I were in the room. We're just like, what we had, we wasn't happy with after they leave the old visitor center. And I said, well, what should happen? And we were just thinking, and it's like, you know what? The IREX should just come in and smash through the visitor center. And that was just like, you know, just pulled that out of the air.
Did you guys go back and shoot more stuff?
No,
or
you just stole the plate after the actors had left.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, you do that that stuff happens all the time in these movies, and that's what it's the fun thing about them is that it allows you such latitude to
rewrite after the shoot.
Right.
So the Indominus Rex, you guys took a lot of time revealing it, and I thought that was really effective.
A great lesson of that is Jaws. You know, the same thing. All great monster movies are that way. It's interesting because he's 50 feet tall. So we're trying to play hide and seek with a 50-foot tall.
Sure.
Yeah.
There's some great jump scares, and some of the best I felt like were almost holding on an empty frame. Like you hold on this empty frame and the pig runs through. So tell me about like creating that sort of tension and the jump scares and things like that.
Yeah, there's another one in where Claire and Owen are in the garage after you think that the IREX is pulled out and is gone, and you just hold it until you think the audience is going to start suspecting it, and obviously you have to be out of it before then.
Speaking of stretching things out, when they first go into the cage, when they feel like it's escaped, you really stretched out the time there. Tell me about creating the tension.
Well, it's sort of a red herring. You know, you want them to think, you want the audience along with them to think that this thing is gone. Almost instantly, when it's revealed he's still in there, then the shit hits the fan.
You were intercutting the tourists sort of just oblivious while the military is off trying to stop this intense, crazy thing.
Park attendance is like 22,000 people there. And I don't think we ever had more than 400 extras, but it was shot in a way, and the way we manipulated it, that I think you buy that there's that many people that are just sort of ushered off into the corner of the park, that's what's attracting IREX to them.
None of the action scenes felt like they were the same. They all felt a little bit different. And when the soldiers come upon the Rex, one of the things that makes it different was their heartbeat monitors. Was that something that was designed in the script?
It was scripted.
Wow.
Yeah, scripted. I thought it worked very effectively.
Yeah, because all the flat lines going off.
Yeah.
They basically cut back and forth between the soldiers and the control.
Yeah, you love doing that sort of stuff because the control room is basically sort of a sterile atmosphere, and intercutting that with total chaos is very effective.
You are basically cutting, I believe there's 3 different storylines that you keep cutting around, and that created a lot of tension. Tell me about like intercutting and that sort of thing.
You know, I learned how to do that from Frank Curiosity, who's a master at parallel editing. And you know, the key to it is that when you leave a particular parallel story, that when you do come back to it, you have to have the feeling that it has progressed, because it can't just stop. I learned a great deal from him. He basically structured Die Hard that way, which to me is the epitome of parallel action.
Absolutely.
And as far as I know, the script really wasn't structured that way. It was sort of Frank that did that. And I tried to glean everything I could from him in that. It's probably one of my most favorite parts of editing is parallel action. And the more balls you can be juggling, the better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But then I would think it's also tricky because you don't want to give too much time to one and not enough time to the other because you have to keep juggling the balls and
Right.
and keeping all the storylines in play.
Right. And again, when you come back to a story that you've left, there has to be a feeling of progression.
Hmm.
Because if it just feels like time is frozen. Then it's not working.
So, is there times that you're actually sort of cutting out some of the information to be able
Yes.
to do
Yeah,
that?
Yeah. Most parallel action like that is usually cut linear,
Hmm.
complete, and then you get to kind of weave the rug of it. You know?
Sure.
Yeah.
Tell me about working with the visual effects company and your process.
We would turn over the sequences, and if we had previses, we would incorporate them into the cut and turn it over, and then it the evolution of a sequence never really stops. You know, as the effects come in, things start to change and evolve and take a different life sometimes. There were some sequences that were previs, but many of them weren't. So previs always helps you sort of set up the sort of basic structure of what everybody intends.
Hmm.
But on this one, not everything was previs, so it was kind of a blank canvas.
That
in a
must
way.
make it kind of nice for you
It's
because
fun.
then you
Yeah.
you get to help design all
Right.
that stuff.
Right. It's interesting because it really kind of goes back to like how I was with it when I was a kid. I mean, the way I played was creating scenarios, and that's all in your head. And that's what you do in these movies, these big visual effects movies, is you just have to imagine what's happening, what you want to happen, and imagine the amount of time it's going to take to do it.
How do you know how long to hold on a particular shot that has no dinosaur in it? Like there must be certain scenes where it's like, okay, I think this is as long as it would be good to hold on this. And
Longer is better. Yeah, longer's better. We used a lot of the handles in it because the animators for the dinosaurs would always animate all the way through. So we would always, many cases, end up using our handles.
sure.
They have it. It's just good material in there, you know. And then in editing it, then you take it to another level where you're not always locked in to what's supposed to happen in the green screen, because it's always great to present a different take on it to the director. With the green screens, it's a blank canvas.
Were there certain scenes like that where you were able to start after they finished shooting, talking about like, what if we did this? And
I think the
is
one
there any
that
specifics?
was sort of had the most sort of creative input and very little predetermined structure was the gyrosphere, where the dinosaurs attacked the kids in the gyrosphere. We didn't have a really tight structure on how that was supposed to work. And we sort of pushed that scene off to the side, and it's because it was so minimal as far as what we had, and so complicated to figure out. It got kind of pushed to the side. I remember it's like, come on, we got to cut this gyrosphere scene. And so Colin and I just sort of locked ourselves in the room, and put it together. And I thought it turned out.
It
quite
turned out
well.
fantastic.
Yeah, it's really great. Yeah.
Does that vehicle actually work?
It does not have the plexiglass dome on it. That's all CG.
I see. I love that part of that scene where they're counting the dinosaurs and they see them in front and then you see the reflection. Was that how it was designed, or was that
Pretty
some-
much, yeah.
Uh-huh.
That was it. Yeah, for the start of it, that's how it was designed.
5.
Before you guys mixed, tell me about like how much sound you would put in for temp screenings and
I
stuff.
try to put as much sound in as possible, even in my first cut.
Mm-hmm.
You know, to sell it. We had sort of built a library of dinosaur sound. We got it from Skywalker's library, and they did all 4 of them, but some was new. And you know, you take as much time and you put as much in as you need to sell the concept.
Sure.
And you know, especially when there's no visuals.
Probably helps you know, okay, I can hold on this
Exactly.
longer because I hear the sound that goes,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
if it echoes long enough, it's like, well, I need to hold on this shot.
Like
or,
a good example of that was a pteranodon attack. You know, all I had was title tool X's to sort of mark these pteranodons. And in cases like that, you're probably going to spend more time on the temp sound to sell, you know, to when you present it to the director. So even, you know, even as an editor, you're putting this stuff together, you're imagining how it's supposed to work and everything. And then when it starts coming in, the scale of it is it's unbelievable. It's like, well, okay, all right, this is great.
I love traveling with the Raptors and the POVs and everything.
Most of that without Owen is pure CG. But all the material with Owen on the motorcycle, that was shot. That was sort of cut conventionally with the idea of us putting in the Raptors. It was always the idea that there would be cameras on the Raptors and cameras on the soldiers. The beauty of that is also once you get into one of those camera POV worlds, you can manipulate sound anyway. It's more fuzz, it's more compressed, it's more center channel.
So you go in and out.
Yeah,
to sort of
popping in and out of those realities, I think is interesting.
I love the final shot, and it felt almost like another tip of the hat to the original, with T-Rex sort of like, this is my domain.
Yeah, exactly. The thing that I had sort of forgotten about this movie is there's a certain age group that saw Jurassic Park, and it had the same effect on them as, say, Star Wars or Raiders of the Lost Ark. And there's this huge fan base out there that's just as big as those two movies. And I think they appreciated how that ended. It's like T-Rex is back, and he's probably where he should be.
Yeah, no, it felt very much like the same ride that I had experienced years ago as
That's fantastic.
as a kid.
That's
and
the best.
It felt like that.
That's the best compliment you could give us.
Well, it was a fantastic movie. I really enjoyed it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Something's wrong. They're communicating.
We're talking about an animal here.
A highly intelligent animal.